Texas Motor Speedway delivered two stories in a single afternoon that no one could have written ahead of time, and both of them are already changing the conversation around drivers, teams, and the brutal reality of surviving a full Cup Series season in 2026. One of the sport's most talked about names never even got a proper shot at the race before things fell completely apart. Another driver somehow racked up the same penalty 6 separate times in a single afternoon, a statistical anomaly so strange that fans watching live were genuinely questioning what they were seeing. Before this weekend is even fully in the rearview mirror, the fallout is already reshaping how people are talking about certain drivers, certain teams, and the unforgiving reality of what it takes to stay competitive week in and week out at this level. To understand just how heavy this weekend became, you have to start with the atmosphere heading into the Worth 400. Qualifying was already generating buzz before a single incident occurred. Carson Hocevar put the number 77 Spire Motorsports Chevrolet on the pole in a surprise front row lockout, with Daniel Suarez in another Spire car locking in right beside him. That alone had people talking, because a front row lockout from Spire Motorsports is not something anyone had circled on their calendar. The starting grid behind them was loaded with serious talent, Chris Buescher third, Denny Hamlin and Chase Briscoe rounding out the top 5, and names like Kyle Busch, Christopher Bell, Tyler Reddick, Alex Bowman, Ty Gibbs, Kyle Larson, Connor Zilisch, Austin Cindric, Chase Elliott, and William Byron stacked throughout the top 15. Texas is one of the most track position-dependent ovals on the entire schedule, so where you start matters enormously. That context makes what happened next all the more damaging for the drivers who never even got a clean starting spot to work with. Bubba Wallace did not get to qualify. During practice, the number 23-23-11 Racing Toyota was involved in a crash severe enough that the team was forced to go to a backup car. Under NASCAR rules, switching to a backup car means one automatic outcome: you start from the rear of the field, no exceptions, no negotiating. NASCAR officially confirmed the pre-race to the rear penalty for Wallace, placing him alongside Austin Dillon, whose number 3 Richard Childress Racing Chevrolet blew an engine before qualifying even began, leaving both drivers in the exact same position before a single green flag lap was run at Texas Motor Speedway. For most drivers on most weekends, starting at the rear at Texas is simply a bad day. You manage your strategy, you work your way forward when cautions fall your way, and you try to salvage points. For Bubba Wallace in 2026, it is not that simple, and the reason it is not that simple has everything to do with the running history that surrounds the number 23 car this season. Earlier this year, Wallace received a $50,000 fine following the Chicago Street Race incident, which involved contact with Alex Bowman on the cool-down lap after the race had concluded. Then came the $100,000 penalty levied against 2311 Racing after Martinsville during the playoffs. Add to that the pit road speeding penalties in Nashville and Phoenix, and a picture begins to form, one where every single time something goes wrong in that car, the scrutiny intensifies, the voices grow louder, and the questions about consistency, preparation, and execution become harder to brush aside. 2311 Racing is not a team that can absorb these moments quietly. This is an organization with Tyler Reddick, Corey Heim, Riley Herbst, and the full weight of an ownership group that includes Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan behind it. The expectation attached to this team is not mid-pack survival, it is consistent front-running performance and deep playoff runs. A practice crash that forces a backup car and a dead-last starting spot at one of the most track position-sensitive ovals on the schedule is not just a bad afternoon. It is ammunition for every analyst and fan who has been watching this situation develop over the past calendar year. The pressure on Bubba Wallace right now is measurable and real, and Texas only added more weight to it. The Bubba Wallace story is significant, but the second major story out of Texas is the one that is genuinely difficult to process, even after going through the numbers multiple times. Todd Gilland, driving the number 34 Front Row Motorsports Ford, was penalized 6 separate times during the Worth 400. Not for 6 different infractions. Not for a string of unrelated mistakes. The same exact penalty, applied 6 times over the course of a single race, pitting before pit road was officially open. Walk through the timeline and the weight of it becomes impossible to dismiss. 6 separate occasions. NASCAR flagged the number 34 car each time for the identical infraction, coming down pit road before the signal was given that the lane was open. And then there is the detail that pushes this from a bad race into something genuinely historic in its own unfortunate way. 2 of those 6 penalties came on the same lap, lap 97. In a single lap of racing, Gilliland's team was penalized twice for the exact same violation. The sequence is not something that has a clean explanation sitting on the surface. 6 identical penalties in one race, 2 of them stacked on a single lap, in a sport where fractions of seconds determine outcomes and pit road discipline is considered fundamental execution. The consequences for Todd Gilland were total. By the time the checkered flag waved, he was classified 32nd and finished 13 laps behind the race leaders. The race was functionally finished for the number 34 car long before the final stage concluded. For a team like Front Row Motorsports, where every single championship point carries weight and the margin between a productive season and a difficult one is razor thin, an afternoon that produces a 32nd place finish and 13 laps down is not something you recover from in a single week. It does damage that accumulates, in the standings, in momentum, and in the confidence of the people inside that organization. Gilliland was the headline, but the penalty report from Texas made clear that this was a difficult day for discipline across the entire field. Chad Finchman in the number 66 was penalized multiple times, a speeding violation on pit road on lap 39, crew members going over the wall too soon on lap 51, and another speeding penalty on lap 76. William Byron was flagged for pitting before pit road was open on lap 93. Ty Gibbs received the same call on lap 102. Kyle Larson was penalized on lap 160. Ross Chastain was caught speeding on lap 210. Cody Ware had a rough stretch with multiple violations. Noah Gragson was flagged for speeding late in the event. The race itself only produced 5 cautions for on-track incidents all afternoon, which for Texas Motor Speedway is a relatively clean day from a contact and crash standpoint. The irony is sharp, the actual racing was controlled, but the procedural mistakes on pit road and in the pits were scattered throughout the entire field. That contrast says something concrete about where the Cup Series stands in 2026. NASCAR is not letting infractions go. The officials are calling what they see, consistently, and teams that cannot manage pit road execution are paying for it in real time, on the scoreboard, in the standings. While penalties were accumulating across the field, Chase Elliott was doing the opposite of everything that buried Gilliland and complicated the afternoon for so many others. Elliott stayed clean, stayed disciplined, executed when it mattered, and walked out of Texas Motor Speedway with his second Cup Series win of the 2026 season. Post-race inspection cleared every car that went through the process. NASCAR confirmed that no vehicles were taken to the R&D Center for additional review. Elliott's win was clean and fully official, a result that stands without asterisk or controversy. In a race where so many drivers and teams handed back position and points through avoidable mistakes, Chase Elliott and his team were the example of what controlled, focused execution looks like at a track position-dependent oval. The gap between what Elliott's team did and what Gilliland's team did on the same afternoon is not about talent or car speed alone, it is about process, communication, and the discipline to avoid the same mistake twice, let alone 6 times. Texas delivered 2 completely different stories, but both of them are pointing toward the same conclusion about this Cup Series season. For Bubba Wallace, this weekend is another entry in a narrative that has been building for months. It adds measurable weight to a season where the number 23 car and 2311 racing cannot afford setbacks of this kind if the goal is to change the conversation around them. Every additional incident is logged by fans and analysts, and the pile is already significant heading into the second half of the year. For Todd Gilland and Front Row Motorsports, Texas demands a film session and serious internal evaluation, because 6 identical penalties in one race afternoon is not a product of bad luck. Something broke down in the communication chain between the spotter, the pit box, and the driver, and identifying exactly where that breakdown happened and why it repeated 6 times is not optional. It is necessary before the next race weekend begins. For everyone watching the 2026 NASCAR Cup Series, Texas is a reminder that this season is operating with almost zero margin for error at every level. One bad afternoon, one practice crash, one repeated procedural mistake, one sequence of decisions that compounds rather than corrects, can completely shift playoff positioning, damage team confidence, and alter the way fans and media see a driver for months. The sport is not waiting for anyone to catch up. If you made it this far, you already know this is the kind of breakdown you have been looking for. No filler, no spin, just the facts and the story behind them. Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. What do you think about Bubba Wallace starting from the rear again at Texas? And how do you explain 6 identical penalties in one race for Todd Gilland and Front Row Motorsports? Let us hear it below. Smash that like button if this breakdown delivered, and subscribe to the channel right now. We are here every single week with honest, thorough coverage for fans who actually care about what is happening in this sport.